our communications director. And we have a little bit of a slideshow, not a long one, to give you a flavor of what VITA is, who we are, what we do.
Okay, everybody,
Just
welcome
get
back.
seated
This
over.
is General and Housing. And it is still amazingly January 7th. Still. And we are continuing our initial hearings on what is working, what is not working, and what should we do differently with legislation in the Housing Committee. And our witness is Joan Goldstein, who was commissioner, I would point out, for a long time of economic development, and hails from South Royalton originally, where I knew her, and is now she's executive director of the Vermont Economic Development Authority, VITA. Take it away.
Excellent,
And
thank you.
also, when you testify, give us the 1-minute version of what VITA is.
Yes.
And what your current hours are.
Perfect. I will do that. Thank you very much and Happy New Year, everybody. Good morning. So VITA stands for Vermont Economic Development Authority. We were established in 1974, so we celebrated 50 years. The sole purpose was really to spur economic development and prosperity in the state. We have about a $285 million portfolio of loans. 30% of those are to agricultural enterprise. The rest are manufacturing, energy, broadband, tourism, hospitality properties, technology. So it's a very good, diverse portfolio. We are currently pretty self-sufficient. We borrow money in the interbank market. We have floating rate through commercial paper, as well as some term debt through another bank. And we're like a bank in that sense that we're borrowing money and we lend it out. We don't take deposits, so we're not doing retail. It's all businesses, farms, not-for-profits. The current statute allows us to lend directly to agricultural enterprises. And on the commercial side, most of our work is done through other banks. So banks will lend to a commercial enterprise and ask us into the transaction to help with everything from liquidity, or they might have concentration limits, or
What is a concentration?
sorry. So banks will lend to various sectors and they put limits on how much they could lend to a particular sector and or a particular borrower, right? So that they're not overexposed in one particular borrower or sector, so that when the winds of fortune change, that they're not caught, unexpectedly. So there are times they invite us in. And so the restriction right now for VITA is that we could do all that, and we could do for agricultural, we could lend to the farmer housing and farm worker housing. And on the commercial side, we're allowed to lend to assisted living facilities, even though that's residential. But it expressly states we cannot lend on the housing side. And so back when I was at the agency, even we talked about this, like we're in the middle of a housing shortage. Why not have VITA also have the ability to lend? Wouldn't more lenders make sense than less? Like what harm would that do? And at the time, I don't think it just ever made it to committees. I don't think it did. And then fast forward, I came into VITA in April of this year and took over as chief in July. And we thought, well, there's still a housing shortage. We know that there are housing developments that that are very income restricted, and rightly so if they're taking state money and state appropriations or tax credits. But we know that there's also a dire need for the non-income restricted. So Beta is going to hire 900 people or something, right? They definitely would not qualify for some of those perpetually affordable developments. And we know of other housing related developments that we can play a role in, and I'm not sure yet whether VHFA will play a role. The Hula big development in Burlington, there's a Winston Crowdy development, and there's also a hotel development down in Rutland that will have market rate apartments. So, the idea behind our ask is just, could we participate? Yeah.
Two things, Joan.
Yeah.
Okay, one is just for the committee, what you just heard a minute ago when she described how they play different roles is a classic example of an institution using leverage. In other words, there's only so many public dollars, right? Only so many dollars. And so rather than just be the sole lender who walks in and supports the whole project, they're constantly partnering with private sector banks. Not constantly, but often with private sector banks, injecting some money into the deal for some part of the deal.
Yes,
You know, they may cover loan loss reserves or they may do all kinds of things, but it's a classic example of leverage.
70% of our commercial portfolio is done with a partner bank or credit union.
Right.
By statute, it's really, we have up to 40%.
My other question, excuse me for interrupting,
No,
but you were just saying, I'm aware of your ask, is there a bill?
I do not know the answer to that. I know we got language and to both House Commerce and Senate
Okay,
Economic, but to my knowledge, I don't know just yet.
right, that would probably be before House Commerce. Yeah, okay,
And I was just
yeah, that's where you are and that's where Mara is.
exactly.
Okay.
So there. So I don't know whether. What do we have up? I don't know where we are. here. Okay, so this is the proposed language, so that we give deference to VHFA, so we're not encroaching on anything that they would do. We're not duplicating any effort, we're not, we just want to be additive. So that the idea, if you look at the economic development plan of, the future of Vermont Futures Project, on their housing page, it was sort of like more lenders, more CDFAs, more people who could help aid this problem, and the acknowledgement that we need housing across all of the income spectrum. Multi-unit, sorry. Yeah, we're not going to be doing individual mortgages to, mom and pops. This is really for like 5+ units, whether that's rental or for purchase, but it's really about the development. So in commercial banks and credit unions, that type of development is kept within the commercial portfolio of those institutions. And like I said, we were able to participate with them, either subordinated or senior, with them on those. And we just want to extend that capability so that we could do it for those housing developments that they're also.
Let me again, just for the benefit of the committee, forgive me if you all know this, but just to make sure and for listeners, when she says subordinated, that's really important. In other words, when you partner with a commercial lender, the commercial lender, maybe they're charging 7% or whatever, which may sound like a lot to a lot of people, but actually, if you're involved in a project with risk, that's not a lot. And you protect yourself. The way you protect yourself is you want to know that if the project goes south, you can take it, sell it, and use the money to pay yourself off, right? And you don't want anybody ahead of you in line to slurp up that money. You want to know you're first. So when Vita or other entities partner with a bank, Vita wants security too, but they'll be if they're the only other ones, they'll be in second position for that money, not first. They
And
would.
not always, sorry.
Not always, and not always,
we
but
do
that's what the term
participate.
subordinate means.
Mhm.
It means that they will accept that the commercial lender is first in line, and that's not always there, but it's part of what these quasi-public institutions can do.
Yeah. No, it's well put. And just stop me if I'm using terms that maybe people aren't as familiar with. What we really like to do are participations with banks, and that's where we don't have to do, it doesn't necessarily have to be subordinated to the senior lender. And the reason why they would ask us in is currently we're in a great capital position that we could offer discounted rates to the market. That is by virtue of some of the ARPA funding that we received several years ago. And we've lent it out and it's starting to come back in again. And we want to pass that benefit on to the marketplace so that more things could happen. And so as an example, on the ag side, we can go low, we can go to 5%. And on the commercial, we've done some at 6%. It's not forever, that's just currently, that's what we're faced with. We have a forestry program as an example is at 2.5%. But all of this is done depending on who the funding source is. And on the forestry program, it was something that was funded by the state. So I just Yeah, so maybe a little bit more about Vita. So predominantly, we're doing commercial through another bank, about 70% of our portfolio. There are some instances where we could do direct, that's the energy and the broadband portfolio. Agriculture is where the primary lender. And in agriculture, we could do farm worker housing as well as farmer housing. That's part of the business transaction typically. So that's already done. On the commercial side, the only lending we could do on the housing would be if it's senior housing or assisted living. There's also some mixed use where if the predominance of the development is commercial, then we could fund that. But if it's mainly housing, we're only going to take a small percentage of whatever that commercial is.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm confused because I have written down that you said at the very beginning that you lend for assisted living facilities, but not housing, not senior housing. So is it?
Yeah, so I guess, so take a facility like Wake Robin, right? That's it's a senior housing. It really is. It's not necessarily assisted living. But we've been able to lend to assisted living facility as well as senior housing after deference is given to BHFA. That was achieved a couple of years back before my time.
So what if you had a place where there was both assisted living and kind of what do you
Like a continuum of care.
a continuum of care. So would you participate in the whole kit and caboodle or only in the assisted living?
I think we could do the whole kit and caboodle, provided that VHFA has passed on it. That's currently how the legislation is written. And we would do, again, it would have to be with another bank, unless, in the case of Wake Robin, as an example, they were eligible for a bond. So with the bond, we're just arranging the bond and selling it into the marketplace. And that is where we fund the entire thing. Otherwise, we're doing a 40% of the deal up to 5 million. That's currently our statutory limitations on commercial lending.
40% up to 5 million, did you?
Up to 5 million.
Okay, thank you.
I don't really have much else. I mean, I know that you've asked questions before about how much of our funding is fixed or floating. So of the $285 million in loans, we've got 234 million in debt. We have a total moral obligation of the state of 181 million, but we're only using 155 million. What that does is that helps our lenders. So we're borrowing money to lend. And when we borrow that, there's a certain rate. And on the portion that we're borrowing, the 155, we get about a 25 basis point discount, if you will, due to that moral ob. But we're not doing that for
Moral obligation, you mean the states?
So it's the states. So basically, the state's not going to let Vita go, not honor its debt obligation to that bank that's lending. So whether it's commercial paper or a line of credit. On the agricultural side, we have a line of credit. CoBank. It doesn't use the moral ob. It's secured by the entire agricultural loan portfolio. So I want to, our thought here is that there are a couple of things that, there's a housing shortage. We want to participate. Housing is economic development. And we're an economic development authority. We want to have that ability to expand our capability to help this issue. Again, not stepping on whatever VHFA does, because they do quite a lot, but there may be instances where they're not going to want to participate, and we would like to play that role. Again, we are not going to be actively pursuing it. We're asked in by the bank. So if the bank doesn't need us, no harm, no foul. If they do, or the credit union does, then we would play a role, similar to what happens in the commercial market every single day. Right.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I guess my
Yeah.
very quick, very brief question. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
The treasurer's office explained their role in kind of helping to top off
Yes.
dollar amounts that help bring a project into reality. your role is at a much deeper fundamental level to help bring projects into reality.
Yeah, it's yes, and so it's like, so as an example, there is a assisted living facility we funded with Treasurer Peacock's funding, the 10% Vermont. So we were able to borrow at like 1% and then pass some of that savings on to the developer.
In other words,
So
they
you could
remember.
par- You could be the intermediary.
borrower.
Yeah.
They use these intermediate, I mean, the treasurer's office uses intermediaries. They're one
They
of
could
them.
be one.
We're one of them.
Okay, great.
You know, and additionally, there would be help needed. There are many reasons why a bank comes in to see Vita, whether they'll participate, and we just want to have that capability. Right, we could help. I just.
Thank you, Joan. Much appreciated.
They're deep.
Very good. Thank you.
So our next witness is Maura Collins, ED of VHFA, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, fresh from another committee.
A break or you?
No, we took a break.
Okay, sorry.
Maura, so just to repeat, we're engaged in what I'd call an initial general look at what is working, what is not working, and where we should go with respect to housing. Appreciate anything you have to tell us in that regard.
Thank you for having me. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm just logging into the Zoom. Sorry, I wasn't. Hi, I am Maura Collins. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I am grateful to be here and to have you all back in your chairs. Thank you for coming back and being willing to do this again. I want to give you exactly what you asked for. I'm hoping I have the ability to share my screen because I want to click through my slides. And so while I pull that up, knowing that Chair Mahali was very clear that what he didn't want, which he didn't want to know about the things you already know about, which is that we have a housing crisis and what's needed and all that. And yet it's me and I can't stop myself. And so what you're going to see is that my first slide is about the need, but then I promise I'm moving on. So let me pull up my, here we go, share. Okay. There we go. Give it a second to catch up. I'm just so fast. There we go. So what's working, what's not, and what should you all do next? This is such an opportunity for me to tell you what to do, and I appreciate it. So again, in parentheses, real quick, what's needed? You already know we need 30 or 40,000 homes. That's not surprising. What I want to point out is that most of what's needed is housing for under 80% of area median income. So the more affordable housing. So what you can see here, if you added up those blue bars of housing under 80%, that is 3/4 of the need is at that lowest price point. But
Just let me know.
there's still a quarter that needs, that middle income housing. Also, 2/3 of the housing should be rentals compared to owned homes. So this is imprecise. And the reason it's imprecise is not because I'm bad at math. I am good at math. It's that if you can imagine a mobile, with wires and delicate things, if you were to, the housing market is a market. If you do something in one region of the state or in one ownership versus rental or at one income level price point, and you pull on that part of the mobile, the rest of the mobile will respond. If you build a lot of elderly housing, you may free up a lot of big old homes that elders have been living in. that, because they want to move to the product that you've created. If you build, more, modest homeownership homes, you may find more rentals, fewer rentals needed because those people now have access to become homeowners. And so housing is a market, it is a public good. We can see every day how it's affecting our economy. It's a public good, but it's achieved only through private market means and private actors. And so it's a stickier widget than some of the other problems you all deal with, where it's all, public entities and things like that. So when you ask what's working, I want to be very clear that there's been a lot of exciting things and new programs that you all have been supporting. There are several new programs you did for people earning less than 80% of area median income. I have some links here of some examples. I'm not gonna, I want to click on this link, this homes for sale. I hope and I anticipate, I saw your witness list, you're gonna have people come in, the commissioner will come in, I bet you he's gonna be talking about the VHIP program. I see Kathleen Burke from the State Housing Authorities on your list. I bet you she's gonna be talking about the infill program. I hope she shows you this link of the homes for sale, because it is great to scroll county by county, pictures of actual homes, addresses, Starksboro, all across the state. You can see these beautiful new construction manufactured homes available. They sold over 100 of them last year. And the most beautiful part of the table is not the picture. It's the rightmost column that has the price point. And these numbers are like $95,000, $107,000 for a 3-bedroom home. They're doing something impressive. That's working well. The state has also had a great program helping the communities themselves, the parks, improve themselves. So I just
Okay. We have a question.
oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going,
I'm sorry.
oh, no, I was pointing to
Oh,
her.
me. Sorry. Really quickly, VHIP, we know it's working. We know it's been working. Would you recommend something that didn't happen last year and ensuring that if any funds go to VHIP, which they absolutely should, that they're put into base funding this year instead of one-time funds?
I would support that because I do think that this is a program that has proven it's efficient and effective, and it's really tapping into the rehab and bringing back online of units. And I just wanted to call, I'm not the administrators of each of these programs, and you're going to hear about them. So I just wanted to call this out to say, I love what y'all are doing. When we say what's working is you all taking some risks, trying some new things, throwing the spaghetti on the wall and seeing if it sticks. I like that, okay? I don't know exactly what it's always gonna look like, but I like that we're looking at a changing market, a changing demographic, and we're trying some things out. It's okay also to learn and change. Again, I'm not the administrator of VHIP. I don't want to get into the details about the 1.0 versus 2.0 versions and what happened there, but that's okay. That's great. Can we do more of that, please? Where we try something out, we learn about it. We're like, oh, did a little too much of that, not enough of that. Wish that had been different. Someone got away with something there. Nothing fraudulent and bad, but learn from it and then have a 2.0 version. I'm going to tell you about an example where VHFA is doing this. It's okay to admit that sometimes our fears didn't come true. And maybe not this committee, but there's some other committees that didn't love these programs I'm highlighting at the beginning, and they were scared that the sky was going to fall. And I would say the sky hasn't fallen, and it's okay. Like, they were right to be aware of the risks of these programs, and they're right to say, look, some administrators of programs know how to run good government programs, and the sky doesn't fall, and it's okay. Tracking data, doing reporting. I'm thinking of the CHIP program here. It hasn't even launched yet, but one thing I like about that is that there's annual reporting to it. So if we start creating a lot of housing that we all collectively didn't really envision was going to be the goal of CHIP, and we get too much of one thing, oh, change it next year. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. We're gonna do more. And looking at outcomes and outputs. I want to just say, it's not just legislative committees that get suspicious and have fears. I'll be the first to admit, I was a little nervous about the manufactured housing infill program. I thought it was a great program and was worthy of support. I didn't know where the mortgages were gonna come from. These are leased lots and owned homes, and Representative Pezzo knows better than anyone that that is a conflict right there. I'm a mortgage lender. We don't do mortgages, VHFA, we're one of
Getting
them.
better now.
And it is, but like it's hard to get loans, 30-year loans on an annual lease lot, right? And so I didn't know that the mortgage lenders were gonna step up and be there, and I thought this may have been a waste if there was no known mortgage solution. But lo and behold, the credit unions especially have really stepped up. They've come up with 20-year products. They're doing it. And so there's one. I was wrong. Happy to admit it. And I love it when so what else is working? Well, now I want to get into some programs that we do administer. The top row is our bread and butter. This is kind of tax credit housing. This is the deeply affordable. This is 80% of median and below. You can see some numbers about the what a household of 3 would earn for our traditional programs and what the rents would be for those programs. I just wanted to, I only listed 5 counties here. You know that there's more than that, but I wanted to fit on my chart and be pretty. But this gives you an idea of a smattering of the state and what we can do with our traditional government programs. And I'm going to talk a little more about what we can do with affordable housing resources. But what's happened in the last few years and what you all are more focused on are the next 2 rows, which is our middle income programs. Now, why would you be more focused on the next 2 rows of middle income? Not because middle income people are more important than lower income people, but because y'all paid for the second 2 rows. You pay for the top row through VHCB and the funding that goes to support that deeply affordable housing. But at least from VHFA, we're running federal tax credits with or without you. And so that doesn't get as much ongoing attention by the legislature. But I wanted to call out and remind you all that the rental middle income, we call that the rental revolving loan fund. You all gave $10 million to that program. We also asked the treasurer for some of the 10% in Vermont money and put it into that program. And we're able to help households earning those incomes. You can see 6-figure incomes, and they theoretically could charge up to the amounts that I have on this table. They are not, I can tell you right now, because we wouldn't approve that. Those are above market rate rental amounts. So I'm just saying what the absolute caps are that we publish to the developers of what is possible. And what we have been seeing is below that. Similarly, the homeownership middle income program, you can see the income limits for a 3-person household and the price point limits of homes that are sold.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to clarify, this is a 3-person household or a 3-person income household?
Household. Like me children, could be one wage earner with 2 children not earning, could be people not earning income, but
So these are their income levels.
these are income limits for the household.
For a 3-person, a 3-person household.
Regardless how many of them are working.
For a 3-bedroom, 3-person household?
Well, you could have for what we are seeing is that the majority of households in Vermont is 2 to 3, it's
Roommates.
no, that there's 2 to 3 people in households typically. And the most common types of homes that we're seeing built on the homeownership side is 3-bedroom homes. That's very common. We're doing a lot of 2-bedrooms as well through this program. The rental is actually smaller. There are more often 1 and 2-bedroom units. So it's not, I'm not trying to match up that you have to have a 3-bedroom unit for a 3-person household. I just had to pick a couple numbers to give you an idea. I could have picked 1-bedroom units, but there's not a lot of 1-bedroom home ownership. And there's not a lot of.
That's just why I'm asking to clarify. That's all.
So just to clarify, let's take the middle box.
Mhm.
So what you're saying is the rental, the middle income rental for let's say Addison County,
Highest limit.
the highest limit to be for a 3-person household is 125K. And that theoretically, again, at the highest limit, that could support a rent of 3,600.
That's our income limit.
Right. Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, our rent limit.
Your
instead of
rental
hours.
limit. Yes,
So I have a question similar to this. If there's a roommate situation and there are 2 earners and a child, are you looking at both incomes or just?
It depends on the development, actually. So we have historically looked at that as one household income and we would combine those incomes. Let's think of a romantic relationship or
Right.
something where they're living and sharing. But I can think of another example of a rental middle income program where they've said it's associated with a workforce. And they said, you know what, we're gonna put 4 unrelated workers in this 4-bedroom apartment. And we'd like for you to count their income separately, because we're gonna have separate leases and charge them separately and do all that. And so we're exploring that. Yep.
So wouldn't it be the person on the lease if there's a roommate situation or even a significant other? Wouldn't it be the person on the lease?
Yes, it depends on how that lease is written. If the lease is written for a 3-bedroom unit, and you and I and Representative Hooper, are all on the lease, and that, so they look at all of our incomes, and that we're sharing this 3-bedroom unit. But if I'm just renting the 1 bedroom of the unit, that gets calculated out of a 1-person household, and you'd be a 1 person. So we are trying to be flexible and look at this in both ways.
Okay.
That's not the case for traditional government programs. That's something that we're trying out new and different with this
Mhm.
program.
Just gonna ask, but sometimes there are 3 people with those incomes in those units because they can't afford to do it otherwise. So do you take that into account?
So what would you?
Well, if you have a limit on the household income, because
So they would switch, like, for instance, in the employer situation, we are looking at, it would be the 1-person income limit. And they'd just be renting the 1-bedroom. So I have to be honest that this is a new thing and we haven't closed on that loan yet. So some of those details are still getting figured out, but instead of a 3-person income limit, we are looking at using a 1-person income limit for that project. So each person could qualify separately, which is similar to how the rental rebate program works in the state of Vermont. You can have roommates and still qualify as an individual person share in a roommate situation. We're trying to mirror other examples of the state.
yes, Mary.
Not really.
more, but I'm enough, you can go.
But for tax purposes, it's household income.
Tax for what?
For income tax, for property taxes, all that, not property taxes. Isn't it household income
How
that they
people
consider?
fill out, I don't get into how people fill out their income taxes.
And that's still individual, the income part of it.
Because you can have married filing jointly, married filing separately. You can have had a household, you can. I don't get into that.
And if you're renting, you're not doing a property.
Right, right.
Go ahead.
I
So.
think this was gonna be the slide that got the most questions.
Doing new things. I will point out that as you all, so I said that there was $10 million for the rental revolving loan fund and we used some treasurer money. That you also gave us $24 million for the homeownership middle income program, if you remember. And then last year, so we had 10 million for the rental program. That those projects have been approved by our board. They are in development. Some of them haven't started construction yet because one goal of the rental revolving loan fund was to have smaller developments in more rural areas newer and emerging developers who may need more time and support in building this rental housing. And so some of that has moved a little slower. Some of it has closed and it's being occupied. Homeownership, those have all been awarded. Those are all under construction. Those are now in the sales phase. And buyers are buying those middle income homeownership units right now. And both programs, as we've moved along, this is an example where we've learned a lot of things. We've had some understanding of how we confuse the marketplace with certain things. We didn't anticipate this whole roommate question that you all have picked up on. Like I said, one of the projects is an employer who wanted to put 4 unrelated individuals into a 4-bedroom property. That town is in rural Vermont. There's not a lot of 4-bedroom rentals to be comps in the market. So they had appraisal issues. Then there's a market study issue because they're like, we don't have a lot of 5+ person households wanting to rent in this town. We're like, no, it's a different market. And so we're learning at how our program needed to adjust to accommodate these unique situations. And so last year, you all awarded us $16 million more that we could spend between the rental and the homeownership programs. We don't yet have a grant agreement with the state, and we have not yet awarded that money because we are trying to do what I said in the last slide, which is learn from the experience of the 1.0 versions of these programs. And we're just now seeing those homes be sold and watching this all play out through the habitat chapters and the shared equity and the market rate in that sense. And we want to make some changes before we open that up. We anticipate opening that up.
Just to clarify, the $10 million that you got for rental, that's in development.
That, yeah, and a bunch of them are occupied
Right.
and, yep, those are those.
The 24 million for home ownership, all of that is awarded and we're in the sales phase.
Yes, although we pulled back a couple awards for some projects that
But
they
generally, it's
but yeah,
well along.
Yeah.
What's the 16 million?
16 million you all gave us last year to say, can you please keep these programs open? To both these programs, and the 16 could be split between the rental and the homeownership.
I remember we were,
Yep.
so did we end up giving you
$16 million.
flexibility as to which, yeah,
Yep.
from last year, and that isn't spent yet.
Correct. We hope to open that up in the next couple months.
I've got a quick question. Any idea what the data is on the number of people outside of Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle who are, who earn more than $195,000 a year,
For homeowners,
who qualify for the middle income homeownership?
so you're asking, well, overall across all the counties, this covered 95% people. So statewide, I can say like only 5% of people earn more than these amounts roughly. But how many
So
people?
how is
in-
that middle income? That's my question. I mean, if we have AMI, which is in Windsor County, I believe it's $85,000 a year or somewhere around there.
The median income?
The area median
Yeah,
income, yeah. There's a big leap for Windsor County between 85,000 and 195,000 and 195 or 144 to 195.
So you don't like the word middle? Is that it?
I don't.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's middle.
Yeah.
I get that 95% of the owners or renters fall into that category because they are part of that program, but it's kind of a false data because what I'm asking is what percentage of the population falls into that actual category?
95% of owners earn less than these amounts. So I can see what you're saying about it shouldn't be called middle. The history of the name is that the governor called it the missing middle homeownership program at the beginning.
This governor did?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't, the planning people said, wait a minute, we own the term missing middle. That means a type of development between duplexes and quads or sixplexes is considered the missing middle structure, physical shape of a home. And so we were using a missing middle term about incomes for a design term that has a long national history of being used. So we need to change it. So I'm like, well, middle income, because I need to keep it.
But aren't these numbers derived from something like a percent of AMI?
Yeah, we can go up to 150% of the area median income.
So in Chittenden County, 150% of the area median income gets you to 195, right? There's your answer.
And it gets adjusted by household size.
Yeah. Adjusted by household size.
The bigger the household size, the bigger the
Yeah. Okay.
income
Am
number
I
too.
correct that AMI is an individual number? These are household numbers.
No, it's AMI for household size.
Okay,
HUD
this is
sets an
AMI
area
for
median-
household size, right? But this.
They
we're
set-
talking about
HUD says
AMI.
area median income by household
Area
size.
median income is.
Technically,
individual.
HUD
You have
sets
two
it,
wage earners.
It varies. It has like number of people in the household adjusted by
Okay.
Depending on county.
Union County.
HUD sets it for a family of four. That's the median is the family of four. And then HUD will reduce it by, I'm gonna round numbers, say 20%. If you have a 3-person household, 2-person, a 1-person. And they increase it by 15-ish% if you have a 5-person, 6, 7, 8. So it's important to remember that an 8-person household does not, if you look at census data, earn more than a 4-person household. If I were to show you actual incomes, it's a bell curve. And where does the bell curve peak? At a 4-person household. That's why HUD wants to set income limits at the highest income level possible. But HUD doesn't then taper off. You don't often have 8 wage earners in an 8-person household. It doesn't taper off the way reality does. It keeps saying, you have another mouth to feed, you have another set of healthcare bills, the income limit can be higher as the household goes higher.
But when we did the basic needs budget, part of the reason that we changed the definition of a household was because of the rise and now dominance of people with roommates
Mhm.
as a household structure.
That may be rising, but our household sizes are shrinking. They are very small and they're shrinking every year.
Okay.
So another thing what's working is this spaghetti map, which is the agencies and the programs that do the affordable housing work in the state that frankly mostly happens outside of your earshot. Not because it's secret, but because you all don't fund it and have anything to do with it. But there is a lot of housing activity that happens among these different agencies working collaboratively together. We work really well together. A lot of us serve on each other's boards, and we have a housing recovery working group that meets every other week so that we can coordinate and things like that. This is last year's report. You should be getting a new one any day now, of saying who got the money and what did they spend it on. You can see the top part of this chart are the sources of money. There's state appropriations, there's one-time funds, there's general funds, okay, that row 0, I don't know why that's there. There's federal housing money, there's the equity we get from tax credits, state and federal. And then in the bottom half of this chart, you can see how we all use that money. We used it for multifamily housing, for down payment assistance, to build the housing. So you're gonna hear from each of these agencies, you're gonna hear about each of these programs. I don't want to steal their thunder. The one thing I wanted to point out is this weird number. This report comes out every year from DHCD. And if you go back in time, that row didn't used to be there. And it certainly didn't used to be there in such a big number, $43 million of one-time general funds. And you all did that because you knew what I told you with the data. Most of the demands under 80% of area median income, most of the assistance needs to go to rental. And you saw that VHCB was a strong administrator in history of that program. And so when you did that, what did you do? I'm supposed to be telling you what's working, And I want to tell you what worked and why. And I'm not going to tell it from VHCB's perspective. Gus, of course, will show up with his pretty pictures and all the stories of what has happened. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you really boring numbers, because that's what I do best. And what you did when for a couple of years in a row, you were able to give extra money to the affordable housing system was that you didn't know it, but you were helping VHFA to tap into some money that we have access to. And that is our tax exempt financing. This is bonding. I've told you how I get money from investors and then lend it out. I keep doing this motion. And that money that I get is really cheap because it's tax exempt and people don't pay taxes on those earnings. Well, that every year, the state's tax exempt bond issuers, which is VITA for doing economic development, it's VHFA for doing housing, it's the state bond bank for doing infrastructure and schools and hospitals and stuff like that, and it's VSAC, the Student Assistance Corporation, for doing higher ed learning. We, back in the day, used to thumb wrestle behind closed doors about how we were going to divvy up the state's allocation of this tax exempt bonding. The state gets a limited amount, and we all wanted our hands on it for our different reasons. Well, then in 2010, the federal government said to VSAC, we're going to do higher ed lending, and your role is going to shift. And VSAC can tell you all about that shift. When they did that, it meant that VSAC didn't need or use as much of that tax exempt lending at that point. So you can see in my history chart that my staff keeps that in 2010, they made this change and the feds don't make the money expire the very year we get it. There's actually a 3-year delay. There's some rollover that they less have. But you can see that starting a couple years later, that all of a sudden, VHFA was getting a lot of this tax exempt money because VSAC didn't need so much and we couldn't use it all. And so what this is saying is in 2013, there was $31 million of tax exempt money that we were awarded to use on housing and we couldn't get out the door because the deals didn't work. We were offering really cheap interest rates and they weren't cheap enough. And the cost of land, even at that point, was too high and development was too uncertain and all that. So it expired and we couldn't use it. And the next year, almost $60 million expired. Now, this isn't an appropriation. This is the authority to borrow that money from Wall Street at a cheaper rate, but it's not nothing, okay? So if you added up those rows 2013 through 2021, you would see that the state of Vermont, just for what I'm paying attention to, which is the housing money VHFA got, I don't know what the state did in total. I don't know what the bond bank or whatever, but we lost about $300 million of what we could have done. And then 2022, 23, 24, that turned around. Why did it turn around? Because of this. Because all of a sudden, there was more money to support affordable housing, which means all of a sudden these deals started to make economic sense. They started to pencil, okay? And when that happened, when we could use this tax exempt money, the amazing thing that happens is automatically, just by virtue of using this money, housing projects are eligible for federal tax credits. And those federal tax credits are going to pay 35% of the cost to develop that housing. Now, that housing has to be affordable. The developer has to be willing to abide by all the mind-numbing federal tax credit rules. That has to be a pretty sophisticated developer. There's a lot of things that have to come together for this system to work. But look, it did work. And for many years, we weren't losing money. And lo and behold, as of December 31st, I'm sorry to say that we just lost $11 million because it's as of midnight at the end of the year, we are now starting to lose some money again.
Was that tax credit or
Not tax credit, it's
tax exempt bond?
volume
Of
cap
tax exempt.
of the tax exempt bonds. And so to the extent that the state can support investments in affordable housing, you will help more projects use this tax exempt financing, therefore unlocking these tax credits, therefore expanding our leverage. And I'll give you an idea of the scale of this. For the last several years, it's still the same four agencies, the Bond Bank, VITA, VSAC, and us. And for the last couple of years, the Bond Bank and VITA have not been using this private activity bond cap. And so it's been split between VSAC and us. I'm not trying to be funny about this. I just don't know how VSAC works. I have too much in my brain already. So you'd have to ask them about why they need the bond cap and how they're using it. And does any of theirs expire? I don't know. I just know that the part that we are awarded is gonna, expire if we can't use it. So what else is working? Well, what's working is tax credit housing and the affordable housing. I'm gonna fly through some of these charts because I want
But
to.
that in some, we're losing money again because we haven't been able to appropriate general fund money to some entity, VHCB, whatever, to subsidize housing that would make enough deals work.
That has been how we've been able to solve this problem. I want to be clear, there's other ways up this mountain. So if somehow y'all could make housing more affordable, it would pencil and you wouldn't have to give VHCB so much money because all of a sudden housing would only cost $200,000 a unit and maybe, the tax exempt bonding would be more valuable. There's what you're doing with planning and zoning and density and municipalities and having them accept housing and expand manufactured housing and all these things, they all will help that. I don't want to make it sound like this is the only thing, but it is a pretty direct line. I can show you a bunch of projects. For instance, we only once did a new construction building with this kind of 4% tax credits in my history. And then when y'all started giving money to VHCB, we started doing them regularly. Okay, so it is a proven path. So what's working? Tax credits are working. They're federal tax credits. Again, it happens outside the legislature, but it does pay for a big chunk of the development of the housing. It brings in private investment that would otherwise go to be paying federal taxes, but it's taking those federal taxes that the investor would have paid and investing it in Vermont. And you can see the incomes of the people served. Typically, as Representative Burrows was saying, Vermont's median income is about $78,000. Renters earn less often, so their median is about $45,000. But our tax credit renters, that VHFA tenants, the green bar is showing that they're earning just under $18,000 a year. We have a greater share of racial minorities in VHFA's rental housing. It's 14% of those who gave their race, as opposed to 11% of Vermont renters overall.
Can I ask a quick question on the last slide? When you say pays for 35 to 70% of an affordable housing development, do you have any data that tells you or could tell us what the distribution of that is? Like how much pays for, what is the distribution of?
Between 35 and 70?
Yeah.
I can tell you, it goes based on which kind of tax credits they get. If you get the 4% tax credits, it's going to be between 30 and 37% of the deal. And if you get the limited competitive 9% tax credits, you're going to get between 65 and 75% of your deal paid. There's very little in the middle. So I can tell you if I awarded a project 4% tax credits, which is what they get when they use the tax exempt bond money, they're only going to get roughly about 35% of their deal paid for. But if they're one of the 4 lucky projects, they win the lottery and they get one of our awards of 9% tax credits, we're going to pay for about 70% of it only.
I would love to see a scattershot graph of that.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. So the distribution of incomes you can see here is mostly, this is same thing, that most of our tenants are earning between $5,000 and $15,000, and that not a lot of them are earning over $35,000 compared to all renter households in Vermont. A lot of the folks in this kind of housing has some kind of federal voucher, but not all. They have a Section 8 housing choice voucher. Also, you can see that, in this kind of housing, it's more likely that these are elderly households. That's the middle green bar, saying that at least one household member is, 62 years old or older. We're serving about the same number of children, and we serve slightly fewer members with a disability. And before I get asked, no, I don't know why that percentage is slightly less than renters overall, especially because we know that the housing we're building is abiding by all the accessibility and universal design and all that, but this year of data, it shows just a slight, looks like 2% less.
And that orange at the end is not part of the graph.
No,
right?
that's my logo
Okay.
that's showing us. Yep. I'm talking about federal tax credits, but back in 2000 and in the years since, the legislature was brilliant enough to create a state tax credit program. You were ahead of the curve, by the way. This is like the hot new thing that other states are now copping onto. And they're very jealous that we've had this program for the last 25 years. And so just to remind you of what you do every year when you pass the budget and the taxes is that you're giving about up to $2 million a year to develop rental housing. That is specifically paired with those 4% tax credits that pay 35% of a building and that get triggered by using the tax exempt bonding. So my Mobile thing, it's all connected. You know, we all like to use things together. So the state tax credits pay, there's about $2 million a year to be a source of money for those projects. And in addition, there's about $3.4 million a year to develop affordable for sale housing. Some of that needs to be used through the manufactured home purchase and replacement program that we have. And I just grabbed a snapshot of, this was a drawing of a Huntington home, manufactured home that was proposed to be a part of a Heaton street development that Downstreet's doing. So we administer these state tax credit programs and appreciate that. The state tax credits not just pay to create and build affordable rental housing and develop for sale homes, but we use the state tax credits to fund the down payment assistance program. I call it the DPA program. I've talked to you about this program in the past. This is where a first-time homebuyer gets a VHFA mortgage, and we will give them up to $10,000 to pay toward their down payment. And it was created in 2014, and we were allowed to sell tax credits up until this fiscal year. And this year we sold the last of the tax credits. And when we created the program in 2014, we designed it. Actually, it really came from the Lake Champlain Chamber of Commerce and supported by the state chamber. It sort of started down the hall in commerce. It was an economic development tool because employers were saying that our workers need help buying a home and they wanted to root them in the community. And we designed it as it's a 0% loan that you get, and you make no payments on it for as long as you own your home. You only pay us back when you move or refinance or die, which happens sometimes, but the other two reasons are much better. So, so they can use it, buyers, it have to be a first-time home buyer. They can't have a lot of money in the bank. We need to know if they really need it. You have to get a VHFA mortgage with it. You can pair it with the first generation grant program that we've talked about, but it's different. You don't have to use that. You don't have to be first gen. You just have to be a first timer. You can see the 2,100 homes that we financed with this across the state. It's an 11-year-old program with a tremendous track record, and I'm here to tell you that it will be winding down, and I'll tell you more about that. Here's who's served by the program. With VHFA DPA means they got the down payment assistance funded by the state tax credits. Without DPA means they still got a VHFA loan. They got into housing. They're great people, but they didn't need or want the down payment assistance. And so you can see that the homes the people who get this assistance are buying are cheaper. These are lower income households. They're leveraging more of their home. It says loan, the LTV, I need to delete that CLTV. I keep forgetting to fix that. That means loan to value. They're financing. They're able to put like 9% of the money they need down if you get DPA. But if you don't get down payment assistance, you're actually able to put 14% down. So that's why you didn't need the down payment assistance, or maybe you weren't eligible for it. Maybe you were in a weird community in a strange situation where you weren't a first-time home buyer, which we do finance. These people have lower credit scores, they're younger, they have slightly higher household sizes. And so, that's where you can see who we've served. So what's happened is that we were allowed to sell these tax credits for 11 years. And the idea was, when we designed the program, we thought we were gonna be giving people $5,000 at a pop. Lots happened since 2014, prices have gone up, we increased that to 10,000. And between the increase and the fact that people aren't moving because interest rates popped up, it means that we're not getting the repayments that we thought we were going to. This is another revolving loan fund. This money is not out the door and gone forever. It's still invested in homes in Vermont, and when those people refi or move or die, they're gonna pay it back to us. And so you can see on the right that we looked at, the green bars are like in the early years of the program. You can see that, you know, over 10% of the loans outstanding were getting repaid to us each year. But in the last couple of years, that has really dropped off. Here's another way of showing it. The green bars are the repayments we got. Look at 2021, we got over $800,000 of money coming back to us that we could loan out. So we didn't need to be selling the tax credits so much. And you can see that happened when everyone was refining. We don't do refinancing at VHFA. We only do purchase mortgages. So when interest rates got down below 3%, they were like, forget the VHFA mortgage that's at 4%. I'm gonna get a sub-3 loan. That was great. People were able to refinance, go on, they own their home, they have equity. This is a working system. This is good news. But as interest rates popped up, the repayments dropped off.
I think you went over this, didn't you, with us last year?
I
Did we
did.
not? Did our bill not?
And last year I told you I have one more year of selling the
Right.
credits. And you all smartly said, then come back next year and tell us again. And guess what? I'm here telling you that I'm getting ready to close the program. Don't worry, I'll give you till May before I do that. This past summer, we did have to ratchet back the program. We're already, we didn't have enough.
But Maura, is this purely an appropriations issue and
It's,
thus a recommendation from us when we give our recommendation letter to,
to it would be Ways and Means
To Ways
and the
and-
miscellaneous tax bill, I'm hoping.
okay, all right, so it's not a freestanding bill that will come to us,
Correct.
right?
Hoping that some language ends up in the miscellaneous tax bill that would say VHFA sold these credits from 2014 through 2020, FY 2026. And I'm asking for 5 more years to get me through the hump.
Right.
So that we can keep selling the credits,
And they
keep the program
self-generate.
open, and then I'm hoping it's gonna self-generate. Someone smart in the room is gonna say, wait a minute, you already went from $5,000 to $10,000 that you're giving people. Is this really gonna last forever and always? And my answer is, no, it's not, but I'm not gonna ask you for more money than I need. And we'll all have to face that then. If home prices get up to $1 million, I don't think $10,000 is gonna happen, but we'll be having other conversations at that point. Maybe the program will have run its course. What I know is the 11-year history of this program, which is that we have lent out about $11 million. And these people, let me tell you what that $11 million has done. That $11 million is invested in homes in your communities. You have people in your town where they are sitting on $5,000 or $10,000 of VHFA's money. It's not lost to the state. It's going to get paid back to VHFA. But in the meantime, because that person didn't have to get a $10,000 higher mortgage and make those monthly payments, and they were able to buy a home, that maybe that was the but for, maybe they wouldn't have qualified. They couldn't have gotten that loan at all. That has generated over $137 million of wealth for Vermonters statewide. Because we can see that these homes, we know what they bought their home for, and we look at the town appreciation, and we can see that typically people now have $78,000 of home equity each. So they're using the state's money to leverage. Now they have equity in their homes, and they can use that, send their kid to college, invest in a small business, I don't know, buy a HVAC system because it goes out, heat pumps, whatever they're gonna do if they get a home equity loan or something like that. So this is a powerful program that supports wealth building of Vermonters. And we know of, that most of the loans are still invested. So these are Vermonters, tax-paying Vermonters who are benefiting from this. Typically, we give out about 150 of these loans a year. We already had to shrink that last summer. There wasn't enough money to go around, so we actually changed our asset limit. We said you can't have as much money in the bank. We dropped that down, so people are in a little more precarious of a situation. Not too bad, they still can have some money. But if we have to shrink this to only serving about 40 households a year, I don't know how I'm gonna handle that, so please don't ask me. I might just close the program for a year until the repayments, I can stockpile enough repayments and open it up. I might geographically base this. I might make this a very low income program where it would just be for, let's say, shared equity housing or something like that, where it's someone, you know, earning 50% of median and not above. I gotta figure it out.
Or we're sort of, you've got kind of 10 minutes.
Is my last slide.
Okay, all right.
The last thing I
In
want to
that
say.
case, only 2 minutes. No.
The last thing I want to say is that I focused on funding and programs because VHFA is a funder and we administer programs. And so I see that impact up close. But as is well documented, the cost of building is very high. And so any funding or program is going to go further if the cost of housing were cheaper. And so you need to look beyond funding and programs, not just because you're not an appropriations committee or ways and means, but because your job in partnership with natural resources and all this, environment committee, is to look at how to increase density, make the system more predictable, and lower the cost of housing through that. And so speed up the building timing, focus on those most in need. So these are the probably non-controversial causes of our housing shortage that I'm not going to spend time on, I promise. But to solve these problems, you need to look how many times it says build more dense housing, make it cheaper, support the workforce. There's things you can and should be doing to address these things. And I chose not to spend my time on this because I looked at your witness list and I saw that you are going to be hearing later today from Moreau Weinberger, the head of Let's Build Homes. I think you know that I'm on the executive committee on the board of that group. We're the fiscal sponsor and all this. Big fan. So just because he's saying something different than what I'm saying doesn't mean that I wouldn't be sitting behind him going, because we approved our legislative package, the board voted on it, and I am so excited about what you're gonna hear from him. So I'd like to be clear that there's a rousing endorsement for some of the planning and zoning ideas, some of the funding ideas, some of the shoring up the basic needs, safety net ideas, manufactured housing, and learning from what's been done through the Act 250 mapping and the municipal planning and stuff like that, and making some tweaks that are needed to go back to my first point. Let's learn, let's grow, let's not be scared to look at things again, because we're all smart people who can handle the growth mindset of learning. And also, while I haven't seen the Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont, HHAV's priorities just yet, I know that VHFA has been a member of that organization in whatever form it's in for many, many decades. We funded them, frankly, while they were in some dark days. But I hope you all have heard they have happy times again. Has everyone heard the news about the new executive director of HHAV?
I know him.
It's my friend and colleague, Chad Simmons, which is fantastic news. I'm so excited. He's such a coalition builder. This is really going to be incredible. And so I'm anticipating supporting their platform once that's been finalized. And because again, we know that there's so much need at that lowest income level. Now, will you be able to do everything that all of us want? No, you will not. Trust me, I've talked to some in the off session. You've been very clear. We all are gonna walk away unhappy in May, but I want to just keep driving home that it can't just be funding. It can't just be programs. It can't just be planning and zoning. It can't just be complaining about that the costs are too darn high. It can't just be looking at, pick whatever topic. It can't just be manufactured housing, sorry to tell you. Can't just be the manufactured housing you're focused on either. It can't just be, design a housing or whatever. It has to be scattershot, broad-based, do it all, please, we need it.
Thank you very much, Maura. Any last questions before we go on? Yes.
So you briefly touched on this with this model of employer provided housing where you've set up contracts for making sure that people qualify, that like roommates or whatnot qualify for the benefit. And you said, but I'm not in charge of your tax system or whatever. Is there anything needed? Is there any action on our part needed for ensuring that it doesn't take away any benefits, or not really because these people are renting, so it's not like it's going to affect their.
I'm gonna say, you don't need to do anything because when we created that program, you all were very trusting of VHFA, and you said, we think you can work this out in your program guidance. It's kind of like CHIP in a sense, where we knew that Pepsi was going to go and write all the rules and get specific and just say, like, here are the pillars that we care about, and then the details we're going to give to an administrator to figure out. You all set a couple standards. You said, don't give them more than 35% of what they need because we want you to leverage other things. You said, don't go over 150% of median income. So, I think there's something about how there has to be an employer engaged and involved, stuff like that. But otherwise, you didn't get into details like how do you calculate income by roommate and bedroom and all that stuff like that. You knew that VHFA could do that. So I don't need anything from you all to find the right solution there.
Okay. Thank you so much. For members, Maura, I really appreciate your first appearance before us in this session.
And like the Terminator, they'll be back.
I will, although it'll be a couple weeks, because surprise, surprise, I talk too much and I have to get my tonsils out. So I will be out of commission. So if you don't see me, it's not because I don't love you. But between not having Chad and then having to do that, I'm a little nervous about how much you're actually going to see me this session. So I want to be of service to you all, but it may not be in the witness chair as much this year because honestly, I'm understaffed.
Well, the next time you're here, we'll have ice cream, so.
Well, I just want to say that really my top priority this year and what I'm going to be prioritizing is this down payment assistance tax credit issue, because we're the ones who administer it. So we have to be the ones, championing it. But that doesn't mean that if I'm not here smiling and nodding behind Chad or Moreau or any of our partners, I see Polly and Megan and so Josh here before, like that, it all is a partnership and we are in support of what's happening.
So what we're gonna do now, Megan Sullivan from the chamber, who was scheduled for this afternoon, graciously agreed to testify now. And I wanted to do that because we have a hard stop after lunch at 1:40. And we had both Megan and Miro. And I just wanted to make, since we have an extra half hour, Megan has graciously agreed to testify. So Megan, you want to?
I'm sorry, I have one more question from Mara. Mara, when you have a first-time home buyer, in the process of advising that home buyer, do you put them on to other programs?
Nope.
You don't tell them about them?
And the reason is because they don't come to me.
But what if they did?
They don't. I'll tell you how it works. They go to a participating lender. So they go to East Rise, Union Bank, Northfield, anyone, and they will talk with them and they say, here's my income, here's the kind of house I want to buy. And the mortgage loan officer is the one showing them their mortgage options. Other buyers will choose to take a home buyer education class and they'll be advised through the state's 5 home ownership centers about the programs and things for them. We are very back office dealing with it after the fact. We do have a website. We are a friendly person and people email us and social media us and say, what can I do? And yes, we send them to the state's 5 homeownership centers. We send them the list of our participating lenders, but we do not do a lot of that kind of handholding that the community action agencies or the homeownership centers do. We do a lot, we don't do it all. We have to work in partnership with others, which is what I was referencing. So, yeah, not to mention 211, put in a plug for that. A lot of people, we do refer people to 211 and they refer people to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Megan, thank you so much for agreeing to testify at a different moment.
You are so welcome. For the record, Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. It is lovely to see you all again this year. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for inviting me to talk with you today. I will get you written testimony this afternoon for sure. So I think everyone testifying got sort of the message, right? Like, we know there's a problem. We don't need to necessarily hear all about the problem. We want to know how are things going out there. So I've talked to our members who are in the development committee. I've taken my experience from being on many task force around 181, and also a little bit of my experience being a homeowner in a very exclusionary town, to come today with some of what we have in reflection on what's happened, and some ideas of how to move forward. I am going to support some things that the people we collaborate with have said today, both Maura and Josh, I think, have hit the nail on the head in a lot of areas. And, you know, one of the things that Maura talked about was that, you know, some of the programs that the legislature has created in the last 5 to 10 years, especially with the influx of federal funding, have been innovative in ways that it's hard to do when you're just talking about state funds, right? And you become very risk adverse when you're dealing with state funds only. But the federal money that came in allowed the state to have a really innovative approach for programs like the rental revolving loan fund, for the middle income homeownership development program, for the manufactured home development program. And these have been incredibly successful. And so I would say, as those federal dollars are gone and we're worried about state funding, that the opportunity to continue to stay innovative, we hope you will take on, because it is really proven to create some incredible programs. And one that I specifically want to talk about is VHIP. This program, and I'm sure Commissioner Farrell and his team will be in to really talk about sort of, they have a public dashboard with a lot of the outcomes that are exceptional in there. We fully support moving funding into base funding. We know that it's important, even with more one-time funding, it is incredibly difficult to run this program with one-time funding. The staff need to have that longevity, know that they have a job available in order to run this. So moving that to base funding, we really support. I think one of those unexpected outcomes or unanticipated outcomes of this program has been the creation that it's allowed for new developers in the market. I think, 5 years ago, we were really struggling. There were very few home developers in the state because it is so challenging to develop homes in the state. VHIP has created an opportunity to support where over 600 unique developers have participated in that program. And some have participated multiple times. And there are some folks who have become sort of small developers who first got into this looking at the VHIP program. It's pretty exciting, and it's happening in our small towns from Franklin County to Bennington County. So if someone is interested, they're not sure how to go through it, they hear about this program, they see that there's some financial support, and it sort of gets that ball rolling of how do you actually develop a new unit of housing, or how do you redevelop a unit of housing? And I think that's, that critically important part of how do you take especially in our rural areas, a property that needs some love to be able to come back online. How can I, as an individual, sort of get into this? And as they build those skills, they're really starting to get more development done. So I think that's been a huge benefit of this program that should be celebrated. As we're looking at these limited resources, again, I hope that we can continue to think about these innovative programs that we've come up with that have really provided a bang for the buck, right? When we're able to get a unit online for $30,000, it can really help, especially in our rural areas, meet the needs that are coming up. I want to talk a little bit about Act 181. So this is the Act 250 bill that came out 2 years ago. I will say we were strong supporters. We were part of the coalition that came into the State House, a diverse coalition, and with the necessary updates to Act 250 report, and supported the passage of 181. And I still believe that the intent behind the passage of that was to create robust areas where we were incentivizing housing to be built and providing protection to natural areas of statewide significance. And that it was a very balanced approach that met the needs, both environmentally and for our housing future. I know and would agree that the Land Use Review Board is working very hard on the implementation of this. But I also think this was a large bill that went through a lot of changes in the last couple of weeks. And it was new and innovative. And now is the time to look back and say, okay, how are things going? What's working? What's not working? And I am afraid that there is enough that is not working in various pieces of this bill, that if it is not addressed, that it could turn into a massive conservation program, not one that is meeting the needs of our housing goals right now. I look at that from Tier 1, and I think Samantha and Josh did an excellent job of really illustrating how Tier 1, where we expected Tier 1 was going to be drawn in a way that was inclusive of where we want growth today, but also looking at, okay, over the next 20 years, where do we need to grow? We're seeing those maps be very small and very constricted. There's not enough uptake of 1A. There's not enough happening in 1B. And when you take that and pair it with Tier 3, which we think is going beyond the scope of what I at least saw as the legislative intent, that then you have a small Tier 1, a larger Tier 3, the impact of Tier 2 is going to be significant. And Samantha showed that map of, in a wildlife corridor, if you are being incentivized to say, build closer to the road, have less impact on the forest, and then also being told, you can't build next to the road because that's where animals are moving, so you have to build in the forest, you are in Act 250 regardless. I don't think that was the intent of the legislature. And I think there needs to be some review of these legislative intents, of what was the legislative intent of Tier 1. I don't think it's being met with how it's mapped. And so we need to address the challenges. Why aren't more towns using 1B? Why aren't more towns using 1A? 1A is supposed to also be inclusive of exemptions for industrial and commercial. The idea there was that these 1A areas should be complete communities where people can walk to work or get to work quickly. And if we're only mapping in terms of housing and not in terms of commercial industrial, we're sort of missing the bigger picture of what those 1A areas were supposed to be. If not enough communities are taking 1B, then they are either going to be Tier 2 or Tier 3. And that is creating additional challenges, again, in meeting those housing goals. One of the reasons that we specifically supported a 5-person professional board was because what we heard from our members was a lot of challenges in the district offices, that things were being done with some gatekeeping around what got from the coordinators to the commissions, that things were taking a long time, that there was not sort of parity between the offices. You might get a different answer depending on what office you went to. And what we understood was the professional board was really needed to provide consistent oversight and training to the district offices to ensure that this was being done fairly. And with the idea that we, want to provide as the state a level of sort of customer service. We're trying to help people figure out the best way to move a project forward that meets our environmental needs. And what I am hearing is that dynamic is not improved over the last 2 years, that dynamic is getting worse, and that people are struggling even more with that relationship with the district offices. So I think we need to ensure that our land use review board and staff are really committed to this process and to providing this oversight. And then
I guess I have one question. Sort of a contradiction. Towns, I've heard one of the problems is that with 1B is that towns that could theoretically opt in aren't.
100%.
But the reason I'm hearing they're not is because they just prefer to let Act 150 commissions, the Act 250 commissions, do the job instead of them. What do we do about that?
So I love the stick approach or the carrot approach that the state has taken to try and work with communities to help us meet our housing challenges. I think we may be at the point where we need to balance carrot and stick. If you are saying, let someone else deal with the housing, we don't really actually want housing in our town, but we would like all that state money for our schools. We would like all that state money for our transportation. We love that state money for our utilities. I think the state needs to be saying, we have a statewide crisis and we need everyone on board. If you want the state's help in other areas, we need your help here. And I have this later on, I wouldn't just put that on towns. I live in a homeowners association because we have a shared water and sewer with a restrictive homeowners covenant that says nobody can build any additional units on their lots. And we're exempt from the Home Act because it was in place before the Home Act. So the Home Act said you can't put these things in place if there are for future covenants. But the state can't really go back. I think we have a question.
Go ahead.
But our HOA can apply for state funds to help do work on our wastewater. I think there's opportunities again. I'm born into my YIMBY of saying, if your HOA is saying, no, we're closed, we're gated, we don't want any new units, we don't want affordability where we live. Can you access those state funds?
Thank you. Yes.
Well, I would, just like with the struggle with Act 73, all of the data, that contemporary data in the last couple of years says that without community buy-in for low and middle income housing, the social impact is too big for residents who would move in or erstwhile residents. How would you square that?
Yeah, we see that, right? We see that with the communities of color who are not, when they get into a community, don't feel welcome. And it's a huge problem. We are supporters of the Declaration of Inclusion, of communities coming together and making the statement, but it needs to go beyond just making that statement of putting the yard sign of like, what does that actually mean in your community? And I think that's part of what we're saying here is I live in a town that is very politically progressive. but what are our actions that are backing that? And I think if you were to talk to the members of my community, they would say like, yes, we want diversity. We want diversity of income in our town. But I think there's also that education of what does that mean? I didn't know when I bought my house that there was a restrictive HOA that said no one can build other units here. And there are 2,000 households in the town I live in, and 506 have restrictive deed covenants on them.
But what I'm asking actually is, and the reason that I made reference to Act 73 is that the state forcing something like that is not helpful. And so how can it, I mean, the state can't force a productive outcome socially. It doesn't, it's not going to happen. So how, you know, how do we square that?
And I guess I would push back a little bit to say that the state can just say, you can have the funding you need for everything you want, and if you don't want affordable housing, if your community members don't want affordable housing, that's okay. I think as community members, there needs to be a little bit of understanding that there is a tie between the needs of our citizens and of all of our citizens, and the funds we want. If the funds we want for our schools are just for the kids that live there now and not the potential future kids, I think the state has a place to say, we need to evaluate that.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, yes, I agree with that. But what I don't agree with is the idea of the state imposing. So
I guess I would agree. Can I?
Yeah.
Comment on your comment? I think that given sort of competing goals and like what's good for the community versus what might be good for an individual making a decision just within their household, when those things are in competition, I do think that there's a role for us to say, well, in your competing goals, if we balance out a little bit of like the carrot, right, with these help for these other things that you also desire, with a little bit of stick that's saying you may not get all of that carrot if you block out all growth or any change whatsoever, right? I mean, I think we make these compromises all the time. That I do see a role, and I think that our conversations need to continue. I agree that we do it in a way that that benefits everybody, including the new people that we're trying to attract and nurture in our state.
I have a question for you. Along the lines of what you're saying, does the chamber have a position on whether the opt-in to tier 1B should be replaced with an opt-out?
We would fully support. We supported originally that it be an opt-out.
Okay.
And if it continues to be an opt-in, that priority housing projects are in those communities. So you're saying we're opting out of 1B, but priority housing projects are still allowed. I think the opting out of 1B shouldn't be the ability to opt out of affordable housing.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
So I sort of moved around a little bit. I will say, in terms of Act 181, I think a technical corrections bill is really important this year. And we are thinking of it as a technical corrections bill, not a like, let's blow this up bill. But it was a large bill that passed. It's been a few years. We're seeing how it's going. We know we need to fix things in lots of different areas so that this can move forward the way that I believe the legislature had envisioned it. And certainly, I think a lot of the folks in the coalition envisioned it. Home Act, that was 2023, did a lot of good things. I think there are some tweaks that need to be made there. One thing that has come up is the definition of served by water and sewer. So a lot of the provisions in the Home Act are for areas that are served by water and sewer. And I think there is, say, a difference of opinion on what that means. And I'll give an example of if you are doing a development on one side of the street and the sewer is on the other side of the street in the right of way. It's just on the other side of the street. There are some folks that are saying, well, that's not served by sewer, so that doesn't count. It is on the other side of the street in a right of way. I think the intent would be that that is served by sewer.
Is this a local option kind of definition, or is it this?
This is, well, the state says served by water and sewer, so I
It didn't
think
define, we need to define.
clearly define what served by water and sewer means, so that an interpretation of saying we don't have to allow that because the sewer is on the other side of the street, therefore it's not served.
So something more specific that would say like proximity,
Right.
your proximity to.
Yeah, and we have members who can come in and sort of give their experience and their, get into the nitty details of how that's been working and what could help fix it and clarify. Another problem that was flagged is municipal plans can take a while to update, and sometimes the municipal plan and the zoning district plan have discrepancies. And there is worry that that's a place for an appeal. So if the new zoning districts, you're meeting the requirements of that, but that doesn't exactly match the municipal plan because the municipal plan hasn't been updated, that someone could appeal the project because it doesn't fit with the municipal plan. I don't really have a solution there, but I wanted to flag that it's a problem. And so may need some thinking about how we write that, knowing that municipal plans can take a while to get updated. In the meantime, if someone is doing a project within the scope of a zoning district, how do we make sure that that doesn't get?
One could, I mean, I can think of legislative solutions. I don't know if they're wise or not.
I mean,
It
I was
would be
hoping.
easy to say that in an appeals, that no appeal can be taken if a project is consistent with the local zoning based on the inconsistencies with the plan.
Brilliant.
Okay,
Let's.
all right, okay.
Another challenge we're hearing about is the use of impact fees. So impact fees being added to new housing developments that are coming online. So as the state has moved to reduce the cost of housing, these impact fees can bring them right back up. I really understand the challenges that communities are facing with dealing with infrastructure, whether it's town infrastructure or school infrastructure. But I think we need to have a conversation about if those challenges are being paid for through new units of housing coming online, that is not helpful.
I guess I just I want to ask you a question, which I suppose isn't that comfortable, but in California, even when I left California 20 years ago, it cost $20,000 to get a building permit, $25,000, some places $30,000. Before Prop 13, which limited property tax, that building permit was $1,000. The reason the towns did it is that they couldn't tax. So would the chamber support an increase in the property tax or an increase in the income tax to pay for the things that right now impact fees are paying for? I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. It's not good enough to say, oh, we don't want it to come from here. Where do you want it to come from?
Well, and I think that's why programs like CHIP are there to help, right? That is a way that the legislature is providing a tool for communities to build infrastructure using future tax increment. And so we greatly supported CHIP and every other iteration that came before CHIP for the last 6 years before this passed, as an opportunity to say, how are we going to help towns meet their needs when so much of the property tax goes to a state education fund and out of the town. So innovative tools like that, I think the bond bank has other,
Right.
another tool that was passed last year. And I think, you know, those are the type of innovative ideas we have to keep coming up with, because just saying we'll continue to raise property taxes, we'll continue to raise fees, we'll continue to take more out of people's income is not no, it's not a solution that we think is going to work and is going to help our economy grow.
Yeah. You have a question? Go on.
You might be getting to this, so if you are.
Okay.
I want to ask you the same thing I asked Samantha and Josh. Would the chamber support extending the exemptions,
Yes. 100.
all of them?
Yeah, and I think we've seen, you know, if there was any question as to whether Act 250 was an impediment to more housing development. I think the exemptions have shown where we've seen what was going to be 9 units turn to 25 units. There, it is a challenge. And philosophically, I'm not sure that exempting people from a regulatory process in itself is a great move. I think if we are at the point where we are having to exempt people, that should be a clear sign that regulatory process is broken, right? You should be able to go through a regulatory process in a predictable way that doesn't say, I'm going to go from 25 units to 9 units just so I can avoid this thing. I think there needs to be a deeper dive into, like, what are all of the challenges? Are all of the 32 criteria we're looking at necessary? Are they duplicative? Where are, and I know that appeals is going to be coming up in committees this year, and we are excited to have those conversations. Because ideally, a regulatory process should not be something that is so scary and onerous that the only way to meet our housing goals is to say, well, we're just going to make sure nobody ever has to go through that. And something that the state chamber is working on is securing a grant. There is a organization that has worked with other state chambers to do specific regulatory reviews in areas. And it's not to say regulation is bad, but they do a deep dive to say, okay, what are the regulations? What's the statutory language in all the different places? And then what are all the rules and the regulations at the state level, at the local level? Where does duplication exist? Where have rules gone way beyond what statute says? And they do this deep dive and they can create a report that really outlines that. And I think, you know, these are some things we talk about, but getting our arms wrapped around, like, where are all of the specific challenges is difficult. And so we are working on a grant so that we can hire this organization to do this review on housing in Vermont.
Who is it?
Good question, and I will get you that name.
Do you know how long it takes for the deep dive?
No, we would have to get them to do that. And because we know they've done it in some states on energy regulation to say, how do we get more renewable energy moving? So I think it depends on the scope and size of what we're doing. But yeah, I know this would be great for us to have done 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We're working on it now. And we want to make sure we have broad buy-in because we want the results to be things that people are interested in learning about. So as we move on, I'd love to come back in and tell you how we're doing.
How much does it cost?
That's
You
above
have
my
an
Okay.
estimate, okay.
So we'll
Yeah.
have to,
But we weren't gonna ask for state funds because we know everyone's asking for state funds.
let's turn it around
Turn.
the other way. I think there's a market for the information that would produce that's urgent.
Yes.
In other words, I don't know whether you're gonna get legislation this session, but there are, I mean, there's so many different ideas circulating around now. I would think that we could spend next summer. That is between the sessions. But I can't believe that we can wait longer than the next session
Yeah.
for.
No, I think our hope is to get this moving quickly.
Great. We're kind of out of time. How are you doing?
I just have like two small things.
Okay, go ahead.
One is, wetlands. Big challenge. We have some ideas on that. We know that that's going to be coming up in other committees. We'll talk more about that. But one piece in particular is our small developers have an exceptionally hard time with various state permitting programs. And I'm not even talking Act 250 here, which is a whole other beast. But you'll probably hear from state agencies that once we get an application, we review it in 3 months. But the ability for a small developer in particular to hire a professional engineer to do the work when there is pretty limited resources there. You've got a big project that you can be doing and you've got like 2 or 3 small projects. That big project is what's going to take priority. I think we need to figure out how we continue to support if we're going to make all of these small projects go through various permitting pieces. We have to figure out how to support them with the limited resources that we have in the professional community that can do the work necessary to put that application in. And then one plug, and more just left for the down payment assistance. We put together information for our members about, what are the things that the legislature has done that you can use to recruit and retain employees? Because I'm sure you hear from your constituents, the state doesn't do anything to help me. We know that you guys do great things. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of innovative marketing of how do you frame these things to show that they are tools that a business can use to recruit or retain employees, and things like employees leaving because they can't afford to buy a house here. Ensuring that they know about tools like the down payment assistance program, the First Gen program, are helpful. So that, I would say, in addition to being a great tool for Vermonters to use for down payment assistance, is also a retention tool for Vermont employees to ensure that their employees know that there are ways that the state is trying to help them meet the challenges that the housing crisis has left us in. So thank you for your time. Appreciate being here.
Thank you. Any final questions? Thanks so much, Megan. Very much appreciated. I'm sure we'll see you again.
You will.
All right, everyone, we are going to go offline in a minute and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. And we will hear at 1 o'clock from Maroa Weinberger. After that, we may have some time before the floor convenes. And we have to be in the floor by 1:45. So, because the governor's giving a state address, we have to get there. It's a joint Senate House hearing.